with more time and a better brain, I could have come up with a better analogy than hit him
I
with
thought it was great.
Well, I'm glad that you liked it, boss, because to me, I'm always like, I'm an idiot.
Greg Jackson today, ladies and gentlemen, one of the best coaches in mixed martial arts. As a fan, I'm really excited to have you on, man. I've been a fan for years, and I think you're a pioneer of the sport. How's everything going today?
Oh, thanks for saying such nice things. It's going well. So far, so good. Knock on wood.
What keeps the flame lit for a sport like this, especially a sport like this for such a long time? Because you've been around for a long time now. You know what I mean?
Well, so that's actually an interesting question. Because I was at such a high pace for so long, as far as cornering fights every weekend, so many fighters, the flame was for me to, try to be the best I could be at my job and et cetera, et cetera. And then I burned out pretty hard, like kind of crashed just because of the pace finally caught up to me. And now I do it because I love, let me put it this way. I love mixed martial arts. I love martial arts. It's been my entire life. I've lived in this world. So I love that. But now for me, it's about just being as good at the process as I can possibly be. So my focus changed a little bit from as I get older. You can see the losing hair and it gets gray. And as I moved into that, with a little bit of perspective, I really feel that I've just tried to be as good at the process with each fighter, coming up with new moves, whatever it is. And so that's my goal every day. My fire is, can I perfect this process? Which of course you can't, but that's the process. So the process in itself for me is perfection because you're trying to perfect.
MMA is obviously a sport it looks like it's statistically the quickest rising sport within a 20-year period of any sport all time. So it's obviously evolving every year significantly, right? As a coach, how much importance do you put on evolving as a head coach along with the sport that's evolving as rapidly as this one?
Well, first of all, thank God. Like, that's what I say. Like, I'm so glad it's evolving. I'm so glad because it forces you in the arms race that's been going on since the sport started to keep up, to keep on thinking of new moves, new techniques, new strategies, new ideas. So you're never really bored. And that's a great thing. Like, I think if you knew everything about everything all the time, it would be the worst life you could possibly imagine. I mean, what would you do, right? So that it's evolving, it really pushes you then to evolve as well, because if you don't, you die. And I find that motivating and fun that as much as you get to perfect the process itself is always evolving, which allows you to try to perfect it again and again and again. So that is one of the things that I really, really like. In the early days, say mid 90s to maybe early 2000s, everything was real macro. Even after that a little bit. In other words, it was giant changes in the game. And now it's real micro. It's, you hold a leg on this side instead of holding the leg on the other side when someone's against the fence. It's these tiny little revolutionary changes. It's footwork on this side instead of that side. Whereas before it was, well, wrestlers if kickboxers can now sprawl and kickbox, they'll stop a wrestler, which was much more macro in the old days. So it's still following its same pattern. It's just getting smaller and smaller in these micro revolutions.
Are you a fan of the sport like someone like I would be? Like, do you still watch fights? Or are you someone like, because there's some people that just whenever they're not on the job, they just don't want anything to do with it?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't want anything to do with it, but like if I work here all day, I don't want to go home and then watch my job. So imagine if you were doing, let's say you do podcasts, so you would go home and watch a show about a guy doing podcasts, then you wake up and you do your podcast and go home and watch a show about a guy. Like when you do that for the first 5 years is cool, 10 years is cool, 15 years is cool, 20 years, okay, like I've seen the podcast, I got it, like it's cool. And for me, it's so much more about, like, I'm not a typical MMA fan, or maybe I am, I don't know. But I don't like the drama of it. Doesn't entertain me at all. Like, oh, this guy doesn't like that guy. Like, I just get kind of bored with that whole storyline over and over. And that, again, like, it's entertainment. Like, we need our soap operas, so to speak. And so females too. We all need our soap operas. So it's fun to watch soap opera. But for me, I just like the fighting itself. So sometimes I'll watch fights if I'm interested in who's fighting, but most of the time I just try to enjoy my wife, my puppy dogs, my kids. And yeah.
I hear you. Yeah. So, I would say you build like a landmark of a gym, right? It's obviously one of the most known gyms across the country for mixed martial arts. How would you compare the crop of fighters you have now to the ones you've had maybe 5-10 years ago? Like not in terms of talent, but just how are they different?
I think that there's more of a crop of more athletes coming into the sport. That seems to be a trend that's continuing. As more money is available for fighters. Uh, Hang on a second. I'm sorry here. I'm getting for some reason.
You got your back. Yeah.
Okay. As more money is available, you're going to get a better quality of athlete. In the early days, say mid 90s, when there was no real rules, right? Like you would show up at a tournament or fights, and everybody, that's the origin of rules meetings. Everybody would be like, well, what are we doing? You know, what's illegal, what's legal? Because sometimes everything was, sometimes it was only open palms. Like you just never knew. Sometimes the internet was still pretty new then too. And so sometimes you could see on the internet what the rules were going to be. And that was always nice. But a lot of times anyway. So as it gets more and more kind of organized and money, then you're going to get a little more athletes. You had some great athletes back then. I'm not saying there weren't. There were obviously amazing athletes, but there were also a lot of crazy guys that just needed to fight. And that is less of that and more athletes these days.
Mm-hmm. So I got to ask you as a fan, right? Back to the fan stuff. I was at MSG in 2019, right? One of your fighters, Aaron Pico, that was his last loss that he's had before he went on this great run that he's on right now. I remember going back to that time, going to that fight. There was a lot of talk of this guy. It was a little bit disappointing because people knew how talented he was. But what's it like now? Like, how's the evolution been for him now? It looks like he's on track now and starting to, be what he's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think Aaron, something about fighting is kind of hard to understand if you're not in it. And that is that learning how to fight is different than learning the techniques used in fighting. So you can learn techniques used in fighting, but that's not necessarily how to fight. Those are tools to victory. And especially in jiu-jitsu world, a lot of times those kind of get out-worshipped. The moves get out-worshipped over how to fight, because jiu-jitsu is not, a wrestling match is wrestling. When you're actually having physical trauma and damage, it does stuff to you psychologically. And that's what you really have to address when you're learning how to fight. So Aaron knew the techniques for fighting, but he didn't understand exactly how to fight. He just kind of went out there and tried to knock the guy out, and either he would go out or on his shield, or the guy would go out, which is fine if that's how you want to live your life. If you want to consistently win, employ different strategies, figure out the best way to win over and over, then you need to kind of utilize more tools, understand what you need to be thinking about, when you need to be thinking about it, how you transition from one thing to the next in the fight, game plan, that kind of stuff. So just understanding how to pace yourself, how to use fakes and things, timing, rhythms, all of these things that aren't exactly codified and taught in traditional martial arts schools. Sometimes they try, but at least they're addressing it. But a lot of times it's just, well, here's how you do a jab across and a hook. Okay, now go win the fight. And so that can trap you sometimes. And I think he was a victim of that.
So speaking of some of your fighters, I want to talk a little bit about that. Like Andrei Arlovsky, particularly, is a guy who's now 43. How has he been able to do this at 43? He's on like a 4-fight win streak now in the heavyweight division, won like 7 of 8 or something like that. How?
Great. Well, he's in Florida now with the American Top Team, and I love Dan Lambert and everybody in American Top Team's like my family. I love those guys to death, and they're doing a really great job with him. My job was that when he was thinking about retiring was to kind of retool his style. We kind of traveled all over the world to build him back up and introduce some new things to his agenda and his techniques. And then he has family in Florida. He moved down there. He's still doing great. But he is that because he's just an amazing person. Andre is one of my dearest friends. We talk all the time still. And he's just an amazing person. Like, he grinds, he gets up, he does his job, he works hard, he doesn't complain. He's like a real warrior. Like, if you want to know what a real warrior is, you look at Andrei Arlovsky.
Yeah. And Clarissa Shields is obviously somebody that's, very sorely popular in the boxing and MMA world. Is there any update on her when we could see her back in the octagon?
She's doing this boxing match, and then the last I heard from her is right after that she's coming back to train. So I'm really excited to get back to work with her. I just love her to death. I mean, just talk about an amazing story. I mean, she's a Hollywood movie, super talented. To even do as well as she did, 2 fights in MMA is phenomenal. So yeah, I'm super proud that I get to help her out a little bit, and I'm just proud to be her friend. I mean, she's just that much of an amazing person.
You think she has a high ceiling in mixed martial arts, regardless of that small setback?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's no doubt. She's so talented and so strong, both physically and mentally. That's just a matter of time.
another one of your female fighters, Holly Holm, just had a fight, right? And what'd you make of that one? You know, it was obviously a fairly close fight.
Yeah, I heard it was close. I was in Iceland on my honeymoon, so I wasn't there and I didn't get to
Right.
see it. But I heard that we did well, and a lot of people thought we won, which is great. But I won't. Holly wouldn't even want me to mention this, but she had a pretty significant injury. She'll never make excuses. Holly is probably, if not in the top 10 toughest people I've ever met, she's right number 11. Like she is, and I hang out with the toughest of the tough. She is such an amazingly strong person that she even took that fight at all and didn't get out of it. I won't mention the injury, but it was significant. And I was super impressed with her. Win or lose, I was just impressed with her courage. I mean, she's just phenomenally courageous person. And to not make excuses afterwards, especially, just shows you who Holly is. And again, I feel privileged that I get to work with her. She's amazing.
Yeah, I did think it was a close fight. And Holly is amazing, by the way. She looks like, you know, just from afar, I don't know her obviously or anything, but she seems like a very strong-willed woman, a leader in that gym, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you make of like sort of judging, you know, because obviously there's been some controversies and all that. And what do you make of all these close decisions? You think there's any way that this could be fixed at all? Obviously, some people talk about open scoring. Some people talk about bringing in more like fighters to judge the fights. What do you think about that?
I don't know. You know, I mean, obviously it would be nice to get more education and stuff, but it's still, so this has been discussed. This is nothing new since judging started in the sport. So let's see, 95-ish on. It's always been discussed, like, you know, judges don't have the background, or a judge will, if it's a jiu-jitsu background judge, they'll give more props to jiu-jitsu than they will to the kickboxing. You know what I mean? So even if you get education, even if you do all this stuff, I'm sure there's things that can help. But I've never seen like a definitive, because it's a human's opinion. I've never seen something that will get it all in line of how we think it should be, so to speak. You're always going to have anomalies. Listen, and I'll tell you right now, I'm terribly biased. I could never judge. Like if I'm your friend, I'm always going to think you're winning. I'm that kind of a guy.
Yeah.
So I respect a judge's job. Like I couldn't do it. I couldn't be a referee. I couldn't be a judge. Those are things that are beyond my capabilities of doing well. So I respect them. And yeah, I mean, listen, whatever, just tell me what the parameters are and we'll do it. But I've been on the side of like, oh, I thought we lost that fight, but I guess we won it. And I've been on there's no way we lost that fight. We definitely won. I've been on both ends of that equation over and over and over and over. And if open scoring helps, then that's great. If more education helps, that's great. I don't know if it can hurt. But I don't see one thing that's going to be like magically poof. Now the judging is all great. You know,
yeah,
I don't see, human beings are human. We make mistakes. We're fallible. We have opinions about things that may conflict with other people's opinions about what's important in that fight. So yeah, I mean, it would be nice if you could talk to each judge beforehand and go, listen, what are you looking for? So that you could tailor your game plan to win, but that's just not the way it is. So you just have to try to win the fight the way you fight.
Yeah. Back to Holly. Where does Holly go from here? Like, where would you think? Because she is obviously not her first rodeo. She's already a legend of the sport. She's already accomplished everything I would imagine she set out to do, right? UFC champion. Where do you think she goes from here?
I think she's got a few more fights in her. I think if she gets her injury fixed up and stuff, I think that she's going to have a few more fights in her. And after that, the sky's the limit when she decides to retire. She's very smart and she can do anything she wants. But I don't feel like she's getting like just dominated out there, even injured. I feel like she's still in the mix with high level competition. 2 fights and we might get another shot at a title. So it's all obviously, but I'm not prepared to be like, oh, she needs to retire or anything like that. I don't think her performances warrant that response.
I mean, I don't expect you to have an answer, right? But there's some rumors going around of Holly boxing Katie Taylor. Is there any truth to that?
Not that I know of, but you know, what I don't know could fill a library and then some.
Right. Yeah.
There's
so much going on in the world as it is. So
yeah, right. Yeah. So
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if she's planning on that or not. She has not mentioned anything like that to me, and nor has Wink.
I know you said that you're not so much watching fights and all that, if I'm not mistaken, right? When you sort of do your job and you like the meat and the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. But is there any division that excites you right now in mixed martial arts?
They all excite me. I mean, they're all cool. They all have such talented fighters now, and each one of them that, but there's not one like, oh, I'm excited about welterweights or whatever. Again, and you have to remember the age and perspective thing. So it's been 30 years. So yeah, I'm going to look at it differently than somebody that's I've been a fan since the beginning. Yeah, okay, but not really. You know what I mean? Like, you weren't there at the very beginning, like, because I was there and I didn't see you. So, yeah. So you get a different perspective as it moves forward and moves on. So I don't watch fights in the same way. I don't have the same ideas that I did when I first got into the sport, because I've had a lot of success and a lot of failures, and kind of on both ends of that spectrum. And there's a saying that with old age comes wisdom, but sometimes old age shows up alone. So I try to pull as much wisdom as I can to move forward on that. And I think you can't live your life the same with the same passion you did when you're 29 or 32, in the same place. Now, some people can, they're anomalies, absolutely. But me, I can't hang around that party. The party needs to evolve a little bit for me. So that's why I'm not excited about one thing, but I get excited about fight still, challenges for my fighters, things that I can control in my process. That's what I get excited about.
Yeah. So, Jon Jones is obviously somebody that you know more than anybody inside the octagon, or more than most people, I'd say, at least. How do you think he'll fare at heavyweight going forward? Do you have any opinion on that?
I think he's going to have a real good run at heavyweight. I think that his natural abilities, he's a genius when it comes to fighting, will be able to carry him through, I think, farther than most people would, think that he could go. So I think he's going to have a great run. I can't wait to get started on it.
Yeah. So obviously he's not there anymore. Is there maybe sort of anything you wish could have gone a bit differently, or do you think things went the way that they should have and it's for the better now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a complicated question, because I'm still, as long as he's staying out of trouble, I'm still working with him. So I still work with Jon. But yeah, as far as the gym and stuff, Mr. Winklejohn made the call that he felt that, and we kind of both did, there needs to be some kind of repercussions for that action. And then it kind of, I won't get into the personal stuff between everybody, but yeah, I'm hoping that eventually it'll all get reconciled. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So I think Jon's the GOAT. That's just my opinion. And I want to ask you something about another GOAT, somebody else who's in that top 2 or 3, arguably all time, George St. Pierre. You coached him for a lot of his prime, right? You were there for some of the best moments of his career. I've always wanted to know, do you know anything about, in terms of what makes him so special, so resilient? And I say resilient specifically because he's somebody that avenged his losses. And I think that's something that's incredible to overcome mentally. So what makes him so special and resilient?
Well, first of all, he's special. He, to me, is a martial artist, because he also
still ripped too.
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, he loved the sport because of the lifestyle it allowed him to live. Like, he could, do what he wanted. He get to train all day, but he's a martial artist first. He was always super humble. So things that would impress me about George let's say that he was in the training room and somebody got an armbar on him or something. It happens to everybody. He was so excited if somebody tapped him out on how they did that. And he would want to show me how you got me, show me how this, you know what I mean? He wanted to learn, he was excited about it. So in the training room, it's very rare. A lot of fighters, especially once they get to his level, have huge egos where they're, if you tap them out, they're like, oh, and then now I don't want to work with that guy. He's trying to hurt me. And they have all these kind of excuses to save that, but not George. George was always so mentally tough, which is always funny to me, because he was always so sweet about it, self-effacing, I'm just but meanwhile, he's incredibly mentally tough. And so he is that. He's just a very special individual. And the way he looked at training and the way he looked at fighting, how brave he was. He used to get very nervous, and was just, and that makes your courage matter more. So yeah, I have nothing but admiration and respect for him. And he was one of the very few people that once he became a champion, he still, trained hard, kept his focus, and didn't let it change him. He's pretty much the same guy. Like when I met him, he was, I think he was still at his parents' house, or maybe just out, and didn't have a ton of money. He had some fighting money, but and now he's movie star and all of these giant things. But he's still the same guy. When I talk to him, there's no affectation or there's no fakeness about him. He's still the same George that I met 700 years ago.
I'm sure you've been asked this about 1,000 times, but the whole hit him with the groin.
Yeah,
that was just a crazy iconic moment.
Yeah.
Is that the mindset that you have when you coach? Is that sort of sums up how you are as a coach?
Yeah, well, you just have to tell people what they need to hear at the time they need to hear it. Now, I probably could have with less, with more time and a better brain, I could have come up with a better analogy than hit him
I
with.
thought it was great.
Well, I'm glad that you liked it, boss, because to me, I'm always like, I'm an idiot. But it got him refocused out of like, oh, I'm injured. Maybe should we not continue into? It was probably ridiculous enough to shake him out of it too, but into refocusing into the fights. And again, fighters sometimes just need that. You just need somebody to tell you you're fine, get in there and go do it. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm fine, I can do this. So especially when you have moments like that, you just, because it's hard for, again, if you haven't lived it, it's hard to understand. Like that guy over there is trying to knock you unconscious. If you're a little injured, they're not like trying to beat you at chess or, hit a tennis ball at you. Like if you mess that, well, I lost the tennis match. So this dude is trying to have you wake up in a hospital. So that can be put the stakes a little higher as far as what you're doing mentally. So sometimes you just need to hear the right thing to calm yourself down and then go.
So I don't expect you to have a timeline or anything, but how long do you see yourself for doing this?
That's a good question. I still having a great time doing it. And I think as long as I'm having fun and enjoying it, I love coming to work and seeing everybody. And the fighters are always just making me laugh hysterically as they bicker among themselves and, talk their noise. And so it is a fun place to work. And as long as it's a fun place to work, I want to come. So I don't know, but I'm still having fun.
And to wrap up here, I want to ask you one final question. Is there any big fights coming up that us fans should know about with any of your fighters?
Man, they're all big fights.
You got a lot of talent in the gym, so
yeah,
I don't know.
My next one is in Singapore. Bogdarel from Mongolia is one of my favorite fighters. I love him so much. He's just such a great person and such a tough fighter. And then Steve Garcia are both fighting there. So I will be in Singapore. Short flight from Albuquerque. And I will be in Singapore cornering him.
Coach, thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it, and all the best.